Good morning, Spring Run Church and friends. This is Andrew Conrad. Hey, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever heard God walking? This is a weird phrase in Genesis that comes around where Adam and Eve say they heard God walking in the cool of the day. I don't know what that means. What does that sound like? What does it sound like when God walks? I don't know, it doesn't tell us, but what it does infer is that they had a relationship with him to know the regular rhythm of God walking with them. And I think that's something important for us in life. And in 2020, I wonder, do we have that rhythm? Is that rhythm gone? Have we lost it? Or is it a time when actually God is walking in the garden? When we're waking up from the lull of the rhythms that we live in, that have all been changed because we've all experienced loss. The rhythms have been changed. We've experienced limits of things that we can and cannot do. And so that is shocking to our system, to the rhythms that we normally establish. And so I wonder, do you hear God walking? Maybe not walking, maybe that's not the right word. Do you hear him talking? Or put another way, are you listening to God? Are you listening amidst all this stuff that's going on in 2020? You know, one of the things that Jesus' disciples, his very own disciples, said to him was, they said, Lord, teach us to pray. That's kind of striking because his disciples are Jewish people mostly, right? And they are people who have grown up learning to pray and knowing to pray. And so when they say this, teach us to pray, it's not as if they haven't prayed, but they see something different about Jesus walking with his Father, the way that he prays with him, the way that he knows him, the way that he goes out at night and spends time praying or rises early in the morning to pray. And they say, teach us to pray. I want to invite you to join me in a walk through the Lord's Prayer over the coming weeks. And so I hope that you'll join in watching these short little videos I'm going to do. Today I want to introduce two concepts from the Lord's Prayer for us to think about. Actually from Jesus' teaching right before he gives the Lord's Prayer. So let me read a couple of verses to you about these two things. The first is Matthew chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. And it says this, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray, standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen." So here's the first thing Jesus says is don't pray like the hypocrites. And what are they doing? They're praying to be seen by others for the approval and praise of others. One of the interesting things about that, you may say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't like to pray in front of people, which is a good thing. But recognize what Jesus is saying. He's not just saying that, hey, these people like to pray in public places or these people like to be seen. What he's saying is a hypocrite is one who has no inner prayer life. In other words, the Pharisees prayed when they could be seen. But did they pray when they weren't seen? When only the Father who is unseen knows? A question for you, right, about being a hypocrite is, do I have an inner prayer life? I can say I'm a Christian. I can say I believe there's a God, but do I actually have a prayer life? Do I talk to God? Do I have some kind of relationship where I'm thinking and meditating on God's things? That's an important thing for us to realize. In 2020, when so much has changed, the rhythms of everything, and we have loss, there's space that was created at first. What did you do with that space? Because I know what I do with the space. I fill it up. I fill it up with junk. I mean, my desk gets filled up with stuff after it gets cleaned. You know, our houses get filled up with stuff, and our schedules get filled up with stuff. You know, you can go from an empty schedule to a very full schedule very quickly. And why is that? Why don't we like empty space? It's a question worth pondering. I think one of the things we need to do is have empty space in life. I think we're overbooked, overbusy, overscheduled. Even in 2020, we've all found ways to choose other things we're going to do. I think we need to create margins. I think we need Sabbath, like the Lord told us in Genesis 1, that we're to rest, that we're to stop. You know, here's a great example of Sabbath, actually, that I read in a book this week. This winter's coming, right? And I've heard that, you know, maybe it's going to be a big winter. We're going to have lots of snowstorms. I don't know. But I know your kids would be excited about that, right? A snow day. What happens on a snow day? Everything stops. Everything's canceled. Nothing happens. And you get to just go do whatever you want to have fun, to go play in the snow. That's what God is saying Sabbath is. Everything stops. The rhythms stop. And you rest. And you enjoy creation. You notice what's around you. You stop to be thankful for things. That's what we need to do. We need to create those rhythms in that space. So that, hey, the second verse is this, the second part of what Jesus says. One is, don't be like the hypocrites, right? If you have no inner prayer life, then you're like a hypocrite. Not just the ones who want to pray in public, but do you have an inner prayer life? The second is this. He says, don't be like the pagans. And this is in verses 7 and 8. Let me read these to you. It says, and when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. What is he saying about the pagans? He's saying they just go on babbling and talking, hoping to be heard because they have no relationship with God. They don't know if they're heard. And so they think, if I just keep talking and talking and talking, maybe I'll be heard. Man, you know what this reminds me of? Is social media. We're constantly posting to be heard, to be noticed, to be seen. We desperately want to be heard. Your Father in heaven is ready to hear. He hears, he knows. It reminds me of Elijah and the prophets of Baal. When Elijah, I think this is in 1 Kings 17, they're chanting all day long to their gods, and Elijah says, well, maybe you need to yell louder, maybe they can't hear you. Oh, maybe you need to just dance longer, you know. What's wrong? Why can't they hear you? But that's how the pagans pray. Elijah then simply says a prayer, and God sends fire on the sacrifice. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, your prayers can be simple. You don't have to babble on, but stop and talk to me. Your Father already knows what you need, so go ask him for it. Like a little kid going and tugging on Dad's pants and saying, Dad, can I have this candy bar? Can I have that ice cream? Yeah, and sometimes we say no, and sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers the way we want. But he's there, and he's listening, and he knows what we actually need and what is best for him. So will you join me each week learning to pray, saying the Lord's Prayer? Let's just start saying it now, and then we'll go into it more in the weeks to come. Pray with me. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. And I'll see you next time.